Demand for a Constituent Assembly. It was in 1934 that the idea of a Constituent Assembly for India was put forward for the first time by M. N. Roy, a pioneer of communist movement in India. In 1935, the Indian National Congress, INC, for the first time, officially demanded a Constituent Assembly to frame the Constitution of India. In 1938, Jawaharlal Nehru, on behalf of the INC, declared that the Constitution of Free India must be framed, without outside interference, by a Constituent Assembly elected on the basis of adult franchise. The demand was finally accepted in principle by the British government in what is known as the August Offer of 1940. In 1942, Sir Stafford Cripps, a member of the cabinet, came to India with a draft proposal of the British government on the framing of an independent constitution to be adopted after the World War II. The Cripps proposals were rejected by the Muslim League, which wanted India to be divided into two autonomous states with two separate constituent assemblies. Finally, a cabinet mission was sent to India. While it rejected the idea of two constituent assemblies, it put forth a scheme for the Constituent Assembly which more or less satisfied the Muslim League. Composition of the Constituent Assembly. The Constituent Assembly was constituted in November 1946 under the scheme formulated by the Cabinet Mission Plan. The features of the scheme were: 1. The total strength of the Constituent Assembly was to be 389. Of these, 296 seats were to be allotted to British India and 93 seats to the princely states. Out of 296 seats allotted to the British India, 292 members were to be drawn from the 11 governors provinces 2 and 4 from the 4 chief commissioners provinces 3, 1 from each. To each province and princely state, or group of states in case of small states, were to be allotted seats in proportion to their respective population. Roughly, 1 seat was to be allotted for every million population. 3 seats allocated to each British province were to be divided among the 3 principal communities: Muslims, Sikhs and general, all except Muslims and Sikhs, in proportion to their population. 4. The representatives of each community were to be elected by members of that community in the Provincial Legislative Assembly, and voting was to be by the method of proportional representation by means of single transferable vote. 5. The representatives of the princely states were to be nominated by the heads of the princely states. It is, thus, clear that the Constituent Assembly was to be a partly elected and partly nominated body. Moreover, the members were to be indirectly elected by the members of the provincial assemblies, who themselves were elected on a limited franchise. 4. The elections to the Constituent Assembly, for 296 seats allotted to the British Indian provinces, were held in July to August 1946. The Indian National Congress won 208 seats, the Muslim League 73 seats, and the small groups and independents got the remaining 15 seats. However, the 93 seats allotted to the princely states were not filled as they decided to stay away from the Constituent Assembly. Although the Constituent Assembly was not directly elected by the people of India on the basis of adult franchise, the Assembly comprised representatives of all sections of the Indian society: Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Parsis, Anglo-Indians, Indian Christians, SCs, STs, including women of all these sections. The Assembly included all important personalities of India at that time, with the exception of Mahatma Gandhi. Working of the Constituent Assembly. The Constituent Assembly held its first meeting on December 9, 1946. The Muslim League boycotted the meeting and insisted on a separate state of Pakistan. The meeting was, thus, attended by only 211 members. Dr. Sachchidananda Sinha, the oldest member, was elected as the temporary president of the Assembly, following the French practice. Later, Dr. Rajendra Prasad was elected as the president of the Assembly. Similarly, both H.C. Mukherjee and V.T. Krishnamachari were elected as the vice presidents of the Assembly. In other words, the Assembly had 2 vice presidents. Objectives Resolution. On 13 December 1946, Jawaharlal Nehru moved the historic Objectives Resolution in the Assembly. It laid down the fundamentals and philosophy of the constitutional structure. It read: 1. This Constituent Assembly declares its firm and solemn resolve to proclaim India as an independent sovereign republic and to draw up for her future governance a constitution, 2. Wherein the territories that now comprise British India, the territories that now form the Indian states, and such other parts of India as are outside India, and the states as well as other territories as are willing to be constituted into the independent sovereign India, shall be a union of them all, and 3. Wherein the said territories, whether with their present boundaries or with such others as may be determined by the Constituent Assembly and thereafter according to the law of the Constitution, shall possess and retain the status of autonomous units together with residuary powers and exercise all powers and functions of government and administration save and except such powers and functions as are vested in or assigned to the Union or as are inherent or implied in the Union or resulting therefrom, and 4. Wherein all power and authority of the sovereign independent India, its constituent parts and organs of government are derived from the people, and 5. Wherein shall be guaranteed and secured to all the people of India justice, social, economic and political, equality of status of opportunity, and before the law, freedom of thought, expression, belief, faith, worship, vocation, association and action, subject to law and public morality, and 6. Wherein adequate safeguards shall be provided for minorities, backward and tribal areas, and depressed and other backward classes, and 7. Whereby shall be maintained the integrity of the territory of the Republic and its sovereign rights on land, sea and air according to justice and the law of civilized nations, and 8. This ancient land attains its rightful and honored place in the world and makes its full and willing contribution to the promotion of world peace and the welfare of mankind. This resolution was unanimously adopted by the Assembly on 22 January 1947. It influenced the eventual shaping of the Constitution through all its subsequent stages. Its modified version forms the preamble of the present Constitution. Changes by the Independence Act. The representatives of the princely states, who had stayed away from the Constituent Assembly, gradually joined it. On April 28, 1947, representatives of the 6 states 5 were part of the Assembly. After the acceptance of the Mountbatten Plan of 3 June 1947, for the partition of the country, the representatives of most of the other princely states took their seats in the Assembly. The members of the Muslim League from the Indian Dominion also entered the Assembly. The Indian Independence Act of 1947 made the following 3 changes in the position of the Assembly. 1. The Assembly was made a fully sovereign body, which could frame any constitution it pleased. The Act empowered the Assembly to abrogate or alter any law made by the British Parliament in relation to India. 2. The Assembly also became a legislative body. In other words, 2 separate functions were assigned to the Assembly, that is, making of the Constitution for Free India and enacting of ordinary laws for the country. These 2 tasks were to be performed on separate days. Thus, the Assembly became the first Parliament of Free India, Dominion Legislature. Whenever the Assembly met as the constituent body, it was chaired by Dr. Rajendra Prasad, and when it met as the Legislative Body 6, it was chaired by G.V. Mavlankar. These 2 functions continued till November 26, 1949, when the task of making the constitution was over. 3. The Muslim League members, hailing from the areas 7 included in the Pakistan, withdrew from the Constituent Assembly for India. Consequently, the total strength of the Assembly came down to 299 as against 389 originally fixed in 1946 under the Cabinet Mission Plan. The strength of the Indian provinces, formerly British provinces, was reduced from 296 to 229 and those of the princely states from 93 to 70. The state-wise membership of the Assembly as on 31 December 1947 is shown in Table 2.4 of this chapter. Other functions performed. In addition to the making of the Constitution and enacting of ordinary laws, the Constituent Assembly also performed the following functions. 1. It ratified the India's membership of the Commonwealth in May 1949. 2. It adopted the national flag on 22 July 1947. 3. It adopted the national anthem on 24 January 1950. 4. It adopted the national song on 24 January 1950. 5. It elected Dr. Rajendra Prasad as the first President of India on 24 January 1950.